For this Sunday, I was thinking back to mid-March when the health crisis first became very apparent here in Canada and throughout the world. I remember when the lockdown was announced, including, of course, the closure of the churches. And I remember looking at the calendar thinking, okay, well, Easter is in about a month, so I'm sure the week before Easter, Palm Sunday, but certainly by Easter, everything should be worked out, everything should be taken care of, that we will be back celebrating Mass together in the way we had before by around Easter. Of course, unlike the first reading of the prophet Elijah, it is clear that I do not have the gift of prophecy. I'm sure for a lot of you, for myself, again, it's a strange time. And when I looked at the calendar back in March, thinking that Easter Sunday would likely be back to normal, I think in a way, in my head, I thought, in my whole life, problems, challenges confronting the world, confronting society, have always seemed to be answered, seemed to have been met. And I think back to the late 70s, when I was growing up, or the early to mid-80s, again, you can see all the progress society, the world has made. So in my mind, I thought, okay, I know what's going to happen. Either all these different protective measures that we're doing, that this will, within a matter of weeks, get rid of this virus, or I thought some really smart scientists will get into a room and make some pill. And they'll make this pill, and we'll all magically get the pill, and we'll be fine. Again, not the gift of prophecy residing here. As a consequence of this time, and I think it can also be experiences not explicitly related to the virus, but in this time, all the usual things continue to happen. So people may have experienced loss, personal loss. People may have experienced tribulation in their employment, or the young people, the uncertainty with regard to school, all these different things. What has happened to me is it seemed as if I was standing on shifting sands. Things became confusing, things became unknown. And even if I try so hard to keep my hands as clean as possible, or to wear a mask when going out, there's the experience of powerlessness because we do not know the behaviors of others. So it seems to me then we're in this time in which we are marked by a sense of powerlessness or poverty. That is, we can see the limits of what we can do, of what we can accomplish. And so too, is it a time of insecurity, of instability, of unknown, especially with the present or the future. And so then, within my own heart, I did not know where to turn. I did not know on whom to lean. I did not know on whom to hold. The answer to these difficulties are given concrete and clear answer in our gospel, both to whom to turn and also why we should turn that way. And so we have this passage from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus walking on the water. This is a theophany or a manifestation of the divinity of the Lord. He had just finished feeding the great multitude, 5,000 men, not counting the women and children. And so he sends the disciples on to the other side of the lake. He himself follows his own teaching. He goes alone to pray. Pray to your Father in secret. And so then, as the disciples are trying to make their way to the other side, things begin to go bad for them. The wind picks up. And when the wind picks up, it means the waves get higher. Despite their efforts as experienced professional fishermen, they could not get to the other side. And in this moment then, they see the Lord Jesus coming to them walking on the water. And when they see him walking on the water, of course they are filled with fear. It is a ghost. But Jesus says, "It is I, do not be afraid." And that translation for us is for our liturgical text, what we hear in Mass. If you go back to the original, if you go back to like a literal translation, when the disciples say it is a ghost, Jesus Christ does not reply, "It is I." But rather, Jesus Christ responds to the cry of the disciples with, "I am." Go back into the Old Testament. Moses says, "Tell me your name so that I may tell Israel." And God in the burning bush says to Moses, "I am who am." And so when the Lord Jesus, walking on the water, tells the disciples, "I am," do not be afraid, because your God is here. And Peter then says, "If it is you, command me to come out of the boat and to come to you." And so the Lord Jesus commands him to walk on the water. And then again, in our text we have at Mass, it says that all's going well with Peter, until it says he noticed the wind. But again, in the original translates that Peter saw the wind. And we know that we cannot see the wind. So what it means then is Peter, walking on the water, his eyes are fixed on the Lord. But the wind comes. And where there is wind, the waves grow higher. So when Peter sees the wind, it means that Peter moves the gaze of his eyes. He does not know where to turn. And so his eyes then move from the Lord to elsewhere. And he begins to sink. Of course, he cries out that the Lord save him. And the Lord Jesus reaches and saves him. And again, this echoes the Psalms, that God will rescue us from the depths. And so then, this story of Jesus walking on the water, it shows us, indeed, we can turn to the Lord, not just because he has a wonderful smile, not just because he has a twinkle in his eye, but because Jesus is I am. Jesus is God. And so do not be afraid. We know then on whom to lean. We know then on whom we seek to hold on to. Jesus says, I am. Do not be afraid. But our turning to him, our seeking to keep our eyes upon him, it is not merely due to his power, but of course it is due to who he is. And we can see this in the first reading from 1 Kings, when we hear the story of Elijah and that God comes to pass by. This little story, what happens before is important. Elijah on Mount Carmel confronts the 400 priests of Baal, a pagan god. And Elijah says, you build your altars to your pagan god, and then you pray to him. You do your incantations to him, and we'll see what will happen. And I will do the same. You build your 400, I will build one. And I will call upon the God of Israel. And so then the priests of Baal build their altars, and so too does Elijah. And the priests of Baal do their prayers, they do their incantations, they do their dance around their altars. And nothing happens. Elijah calls on the God of Israel. And the altar that Elijah made is engulfed in fire. The God of Israel is God. And then Elijah, the prophet of justice and judgment, he then goes and he slaughters the 400 priests. And this then is a moment of transition in salvation history, a time of change in which God is revealing even more. Because Elijah then seeks to escape the queen. And when Elijah is told that God will be passing by, we know that he is not in the earthquake or the great wind or what have you, but rather in the sheer silence. But then God speaks to Elijah. He whispers to Elijah. Elijah, who had just slaughtered the 400 priests. God tells Elijah, in a sense, your time of prophecy is finished. Go and anoint Elisha as the new prophet. Elijah, the prophet of justice and judgment. We may say fire and brimstone. God says, no, go now and anoint Elisha as my prophet. Elisha is the prophet of mercy. And so then in Jesus Christ, throughout the gospel, we are shown the clear face of our God. A God that does not desire sacrifice, but mercy. And so then, if we feel we are standing on shifting sands, if we do not know sometimes where to turn, if we do not know on whom to lean, if we do not know with whom to hold on to, Jesus tells the disciples and tells us, I am, and know who he is. Our God is love, St. John says. Jesus Christ reveals to us that from God we are given, we can expect compassion, we can expect understanding, we can expect love, we can expect mercy, because this is who our God is. And so in March and April and May and June, I was a fool. Because I did not know where to turn. I did not know on whom to lean. We can turn to our God. We can lean on our God. We can hold on to our God. Because He is mercy. He is love.